Okay, so let me just talk to them first. So, hello, everybody who's going to come on in. I'm here with Erica Totten from Unchained Visioning, and we are going to talk about ways to help ourselves emancipate our emotions, because that's what we need to do. So, I'm going to probably be looking this way a lot, but just watch us here. Okay, so I'm ready. Okay. Welcome to the Sanctuary. You're listening to DC Radio 96.3, HD4, and DCRadio.gov, where we inspire, educate, and empower women of color to unapologetically transform into their most authentic and healthy selves by tapping into the goddess within. I'm Wendy Cherry, your host, and I'm so happy to have you here in the Sanctuary today. My guest is Erica Totten, a dynamic facilitator, trainer, activist, healer, spiritual life coach, and community builder from Washington, D.C. She's committed to the movement for Black liberation and the evolution of our collective consciousnesses. Is that a word, consciousness? Consciousness. Okay. She is the founder and director of Unchained Visioning, a core member of Harriet's Apothecary, which Healers Collective, Harriet's Apothecary Healers Collective, which I'm going to ask you about. Okay. And a co-creator of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Washington, D.C., and where she focuses on centering healing and visioning within activism. So she's a world traveler, and she does this work around the world, from South Africa to Charlottesville. Erica creates and facilitates transformative healing spaces for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and identities to process racial stress and trauma, and to experience embodied liberation and collective joy in the midst of dismantling systems of oppression. She's also a mom and a wife. Yes. And she organizes to build chosen families of health, restoration, and radical love. And radical love is what we need right now.
Yes, we do.
There's a lot going on right about now. And so, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming. I did like a little, we're also doing this live for our listeners who are listening on DC Radio. We're also doing it on our Facebook page. So it's new. So we're still trying to work out the kinks. So everybody bear with us, okay? Bear with us. So Erica.
Yes.
Last night were the midterm elections. Mm-hmm. So we have the results today. It's November here on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. And I have to be honest, I did my part, but I didn't follow it at all because I didn't want my nerves to be stressed out.
Yeah.
I have other things to focus on. And I knew that once I did the part that I could control, I did not try to control anything else.
Yeah.
And so I didn't look last night. Even this morning, I didn't look. What I did was I sat in my meditation chair and I let the sun hit my face. And I just enjoyed the time before I decided to look at what was going to go down. Mm-hmm. And I had to make peace with what was going to go down because I know who we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very blatant and it's unapologetic foolishness. And the trickery is so serious that, like I said, I had to like ground myself before I decided to engage. So the sun was beautiful in my meditation chair. I grounded myself. I enjoyed it. And I decided I'm going to vibrate high today.
Yeah.
That was a choice.
Yeah.
So those things are the choices that we have to make.
A
right?
conscious choice.
Conscious choice. Mm-hmm. So then I engaged. And, it was like there were some pleasantries that went down and there's some other things that just were the status quo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I know for me, because I think, and probably we and people that we surround ourselves, we think a certain way. But I know for the general public, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of angst, a lot of fear, a lot of pissed offness, and a lot of well, that's why I don't do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it again. And I'm not going to vote, and I'm not going to do whatever.
Which I understand.
Right, right. So, I mean, I have a lot of friends who just don't vote. And they're straight up like, I'm not voting. And they give you the reasons why. And they've given me documents to show why. And so I just chose to this time. I'll decide what I'm going to do next time because I can.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it ain't no judgment on anybody. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So how did you manage the process? I'm not asking you if you voted. I'm just saying, how did you today? What did you think today?
Yeah. One thing, it really was about really not immersing myself into everything. I was already aware of the multitude of voter suppression all across the country. And in Texas, some of those big places that we were watching, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. And it was just like, I knew, like, you know, I have hope and faith in our people, not in these systems.
Right.
And it's okay to say that. And so I wasn't surprised, particularly with so many people, particularly in Texas, that were saying when they voted all Democratic Party, and then when they got their receipt, it said all Republican.
Oh, wow.
And it also happened in Maryland. It happened to my aunt, where she ended up voting for Ben Jealous for the governor. And when she saw her receipt, it said the Republican candidate.
Wow.
So they had to get it fixed. So it's happening all across the country, even to the point of in Atlanta and Southwest Atlanta, one of the polling places only had 3 voting machines, where you have more affluent areas, more white areas had plenty of machines, and the lines weren't long.
Right.
And so just recognizing that and seeing that, it's just like, I know how this is going to turn out. And so how can I keep myself whole and present and hold space for people who this is going to be triggering for them? And so for me, I can't consume a lot of it. It's recognizing the truth of what this country is and how it operates, and recognizing that, and how do we as people hold on and reach out to each other as we're continuing to build the world that we want, and it may not be within this system. Right.
So tell me a little bit about your mission and your vision with Unchained, visioning.
Sure.
And excuse me, and how you got to start doing that work.
So the how I started doing the work was with myself first.
Right.
Making sure that I'm present and aware within myself the things that I need to heal.
Okay.
And the way in which I was showing up in my own life, and what I was taught about myself from various systems, from people who had their own trauma that may have been teaching me out of that and projecting that onto me. And I got to a point where I had to say, I do not know who I am.
Right.
And sometimes for people, that's the most scariest place, and the scariest thing to actually admit to yourself and to say out loud. But it's the most beautiful place that you can be, because knowing that you can recreate who you want to be, the highest expression of yourself. And so in being able to say, I do not know who I am, I can now unpack who I was taught I was. And does it still jive well? Does it still work for me? And what was I taught about myself that might be connected to systems of oppression? As a Black woman at the intersection of racism and sexism, what was I taught about my Blackness? What was I taught about my gender expression? And if any of that makes me question my worth, makes me question my voice or my ability, I had to unpack that and see where that came from,
right,
and release it, and to shift that and reframe that to some liberating truths. And that's why when I say, what does the unchained you look like? That's what I ask my clients, because I started asking myself that. What does the unchained you look like? And when I say that, I mean emotionally, mentally, physically, sexually, financially, spiritually. And what area am I being called to focus on right now. And for me, it started with spiritually.
Right.
You know, what does the unchained me look like spiritually?
Right.
And how can I embody that liberated self in that way? But I had to release everything that I was taught that was connected to oppression.
Right.
When it comes to spirituality and my connection with God, with Source, with the universe, I had to release all of that. Anything that did not feel like liberation, I let it go.
So that's really interesting because I like how you explained the process. I went through the same process. And I started with spirituality, but I just didn't have a way to express that that's how I did it, the way that you just did. I just was doing it. And I was doing it in secrecy because part of it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Part of it, I was so rageful at learning some of these truths where I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up in a town that had the 5% nation, right? And so, and then I was raised by my grandmother as a Christian. So my mom was sort of very flexible, you know, do what you want to do. You know what I'm saying? There was no real outward anything. But when we went to my grandparents' house, that's when it was. But then I have this situation at home in New Jersey with the 5% nation, the gods is what we would call them, right? And they were so excited to learn about themselves as men and as women, but they didn't allow it to translate in a way. So I always talk about inspiring, like enlightening without frightening people. There was no like gentle way that they would share this information with you. I think that they were so excited about it. They would go to the rallies and they would learn this stuff and they would almost beat you on the head with it. Just like a Christian would beat you on the head with that. And just like I beat people in the head when So, you know, those were little seeds that were planted to just know that, you know, there's a God in me is the main thing that I learned from the gods. You know what I'm saying? The 5% nation where I grew up is like they said, I am God. And I was taught, you the devil if you think you're God, right? And so I was just like coming 7 years ago to when I started to liberate myself and start to do research, I went back to the gods and I'm thinking, they were on to something. It was just their approach and their delivery may have turned me off and probably a lot of other people because it was so hard and in your face. And it was more like they're going to test you to see if you know versus just sharing the information and being loving about it.
Well, a part of that is connected to ego, right? So when we start talking about what does the unchained you look like, it has to be free from the egoic self that projects its identity onto other people without their consent.
Right.
And so when we talk about having, you know, we can be problematic and brilliant at the same time.
Right.
And we are, right? And so, you know, we can have this particular belief and it's beautiful that that's where that came from, right? That I am the highest expression of God, that I am God. God is me, like Erica, God, Erica, right? And if there is any oppressive ideology that's also within that, it diminishes the message, because if in that same community we are dehumanizing LGBTQ folks, right? Like God is them too, right? And so, and then who gets to determine?
Who gets to say?
Exactly. And so again, it's that egoic piece that would seek to project itself onto other people. And, you know, when we talk about healing and healing justice, it is being able to create more choice for people and allowing them to express themselves and to embody the divine in whatever way they know how. And being affirming of that, giving support where we're asked. Right. But not just imposing, because then we become the oppressor. Right. But we wear it all white. Right. We're, you know, we have the garb of, you know, spiritual healer and things. But if we are still operating out of those internalized ideologies that we ourselves as healers have not processed and released,
Right.
we are doing harm to people who are seeking other ways of being.
Right.
And that's not okay.
That's not okay. And it's so interesting because I see a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, I have evolved in my spirituality. And so I let everybody do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I let everybody. I'm just saying my thought is do what
There's
you want to do.
space.
Right.
Yeah.
There's space. And in my upbringing of myself from my grandmother and other people, that was not the case. There was no space. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It is this and that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so as I'm creating and doing my work in the Goddess Awakening and Healing Sanctuary, I don't even call myself a healer.
Mm.
What I do is call myself the mirror and the guide.
Mm.
The mirror guide is what I do because I'm still figuring some of this stuff out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm still figuring it out. And I'm still going through things and learning new things and ever evolving and never will feel like I have it all.
Right.
And then I have more tools than many people. And so I'm just guiding them back to themselves because every human being is capable of healing themselves.
Yeah.
Spiritually, emotionally, financially, energetically, however.
Yeah.
But if you're never given that permission and never even know you can, because you think you got to look to somebody else to do it, then you give your power to them.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's where the mirror guy comes in. Is it's like, I'm still learning too. I give you space to do what, to do it whatever way makes you feel good. And then I'll guide you. And then, like I say, the Goddess Awakening and Healing Sanctuary, this is a safe space. The sanctuary is where you come to heal and to moan and cry and, be in the fetal position if you need to and be safe.
Yeah. And that it's okay.
And it's
okay to be able to come and just come as you are, and making it accessible. And that's why when I facilitate emotional emancipation circles, it is the same language, right? It's just having us be able to incorporate this language of processing.
Right.
And, having it be accessible, giving people the words and language to name what it is that they're experiencing.
Right. So Emotional Emancipation Circle,
mm-hmm.
Share what that is.
Sure. So Emotional Emancipation Circles were created by the Association of Black Psychologists. And I was introduced to the Association of Black Psychologists when I try to think about like the exact time or moment. But I had this, I was hosting small group
mm-hmm.
sessions at my home,
okay.
right? And they evolved from like spiritual evolution to now looking at the spaces in which we're in and how racism, sexism, various forms of oppression were interwoven into what we were learning about spirituality and what we were learning about ourselves.
Right.
Because of some of the things that we had to unlearn about like unworthiness and things like that, many of us learned from the church.
Yep.
There are literal songs where you are crying out, I'm not worthy. And like what that does to your spirit to actually believe that, right? And then it was translating in relationships and all these different things with the group that I was facilitating. And so I recognized that I needed to shift to, this was maybe right before the George Zimmerman verdict.
Mm-hmm.
And I had hosted the circles from starting in 2010, but during that time, this is what was happening.
Okay.
And so that was the flow of the conversation, and recognizing that, yes, we could have small group circles with a particular curriculum around spirituality. What are the small group circles that talk about processing racial stress and trauma?
Right.
And I knew that this is the path that I was on, and I couldn't bring them along without their consent. But these are the conversations we were having. And so I just put it out to the universe. Like, I know there are circles of people who are doing this work, talking about racial stress and trauma and internalized oppression. And there's a curriculum out there. I know it is. I don't have to create it, right?
Right.
And I ended up meeting Dr. Kevin Washington. who was the president of the Association of Black Psychologists. I ended up crashing the CBC during one year.
I think I heard about that from some friends, Erica.
And then ended up going to a panel that they were hosting, and they were talking about trauma. And they were talking about oppression, and at this moment, this was after Michael Brown was murdered. It was the same year, actually, and I went down to Ferguson maybe 4 days after Michael Brown was murdered to be with the people.
Okay.
And that was what the ask was. They asked for people to come from everywhere and stand with them.
Okay.
It was the uprising. So how could I not?
Right.
Many Black people in this country are waiting for the uprising. Right. And that is what it was.
Right.
And so when I came back, so many people were talking about Ferguson in a way that I felt dishonored the people who were there and actually there on the ground, the citizens of Ferguson.
Right.
And so that was one of the commitments that I made to them. I'm not going to let anybody denigrate you and try to tell your story without actually having been there and connecting with you.
Right.
And so that's how a lot of my visibility happened in DC after coming back from Ferguson and holding people accountable who were having panels, having not experienced anything there on the ground, just from what the media was sharing with them.
Right.
And so I wanted to see what these folks on this panel were going to be talking about, and if they were making the connections to what was happening there in Ferguson, what the folks were experiencing, because I knew that there were activists there that didn't even identify as activists that were being burned out emotionally, spiritually. Right. And so what I was doing when I was there was connecting with them on that level and offering that support. And so from there, I went to the panel, and they were having a conversation. They were talking about emotional emancipation circles. And I remember standing up and I said, right now in Ferguson, people are hurting. Yeah. They are being occupied by the police and continuing to be out in the street for protest and are continuing. And I was even there when I came back. I still had the anti-tear gas spray all over my shirt and on my glasses, because this is how we were being treated. And so I challenged them to come to Ferguson, bring emotional emancipation circles to Ferguson, train people to be able to hold space for themselves and for their community. Yeah. Because I said, it's needed. Will you come back with me in October? When we did Ferguson in October. Yeah. And I met with them afterwards. They said that they would. I ended up meeting with them afterwards. This is Dr. Cheryl Grills and Enola Aird. And they weren't able to come back in October, but they did come back in December. And they came back, it was from around my birthday, actually. And so I flew back to Ferguson, and that was where I was trained. They hosted a training for folks there in Ferguson to host these circles. So that's where I got trained. And then I brought it back to DC. And with emotional emancipation circles, it's supporting people in identifying any internalized ideology that prevents you from seeing the fullest potential of who you are. Right. And so if there are any self-limiting beliefs of unworthiness, or even just anti-Blackness, you have some Black people that will say things like, man, I can't stand working with Black people. But you Black. Right.
Your mom and your grandma.
Right. And you're usually saying that to a Black person. And so when we say that, what is it that we're perpetuating? Right. And then also being able to identify the impacts of compounded trauma. So it's connected to Dr. Joy DeGruy's work of post-traumatic slave syndrome. So what are these impacts, the multi-generational trauma that we carry with us in our DNA? Because all this trauma compounded with no support, right? No service, no counseling, no therapy. We just out here. Right. And then having kids, and it's transmitted to them as well through their DNA, this trauma. And so people think that these are characteristics, that trauma responses, outbursts of anger, fear for shortened future, hypervigilance, that these are characteristics of Black people when they are actually symptoms of trauma. Right. And so once we're able to name what they are, we can recognize, okay, so who are we outside of this trauma? Who were we?
Right.
Right. And so there's this act of reclaiming that happens in emotional emancipation circles, because now folks have language to name what they knew all along.
Right. Innately,
you know?
but we don't trust ourselves because we're taught not to trust
Right.
what's happening. So
right.
I think about when the Mike Brown verdict came out.
Yeah.
Okay. I was in corporate America on a business trip, and one of the few that looked like me out of like 200 some odd people, right? And so it's all over the news. It's happening tonight, or they're just waiting for it to come out. Whatever. It came out kind of late, right?
Yeah, I remember that night. And they did that on purpose.
Yeah, they did it on purpose. So I'm sitting there, and then everybody's just at the bar. They chilling. It means nothing. They're so disconnected from it. And I'm like, so let me go to my room. Now, this was however many years ago that was. I didn't even think of it how you just explained it. I just knew that innately it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I felt alone, and I felt sad, and then I felt angry because these are my friends, and they had to borrow some wings.
Yeah.
And I'm about to throw up.
Yeah.
Right. So I go in my room and then I watch it. And I'm like, oh my God. So then I'm traumatized, right?
Yeah.
So then my daughter was with her dad, and they called because he was trying to give her context. I was trying to give her context, and we had none. And she was little. I mean, I don't remember how many years ago it was.
Yeah, this was in 2014.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was young, 10 maybe. And so we're all traumatized. And so then the next day I go to my meeting, and it's business as usual. They over there at the omelet, chef. And I'm sitting there like,
the world is falling apart.
The world is falling apart. And even some of the ones who look like me, I think they had to disconnect from it.
Yeah.
So I'm the only one like, what the heck's going on? You know what I'm saying? So I would appreciate having known some of the tips.
Yep.
And I think I just did, your body knows how to take care of itself. My body knew how to take care of itself. I just went to sleep as best that I could.
Sometimes you just got to go to sleep.
The best that I could, because I was stressed out and I was angry, and I was like, there's no way that we know what happened and how this played out. And they just act like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So tell us, so then time goes forward, and then I happen to meet you at the Georgetown. So it was what was the group? The young ladies at Georgetown.
Oh, the Brave Summit.
Yeah, so I went to the Brave Summit, right? It was just an event at Georgetown.
Brave Summit is amazing.
These young sisters have it going on to be collegiates, right? Now, when I was a collegiate, I didn't know none of this stuff. So I get inspired and empowered just going. So I've been twice. I don't know how many there have been, but I've been twice. And so I see you on the stage there. And then I go to your breakout session, and you're talking about stuff that's making me feel better.
Yeah.
And you're giving tools and tips to make me feel better. So then you talked about the Emotional Emancipation Circle, and I went to one of those. Now I went to it when I was totally beaten down. And I was making changes in my own personal life to remove people, places, things, entities, and I was needing some support to just cut those ties. And I came to one of your circles right on H Street, and it was awesome. I had never heard those conversations. I had never heard people put things that way. I had never, you even got some rules that you follow in there, and I was like, this is cool, right? So emotional emancipation circles, when you hold them here in Washington, D.C., what do they look like?
Yeah.
And share some of the rules, and I don't even want to say rules, there's just some protocol that has to happen in order for this to be successful. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So what emotional emancipation circles look like, and they may look different depending on the facilitator. What I've done with the curriculum is queered it quite a bit to have it be affirming and representative of all identities of Blackness, no matter how you identify. And that's intentional to make sure that those Black folks who are also the most marginalized within us, so Black trans women, Black queer folk, making sure that there is space for all of us. So it's queered quite a bit. What does it look like? It's more so the energy of liberate. Like? Yeah, what does it feel like? It feels, my intention is that it feels like a place where you can be free.
Right.
Where you can take off your mask.
Right.
Where no one else is wearing the mask that is gonna, encourage you to keep yours on. Right. And there's a skilled way of facilitating that space, which, starting out as a teacher, teaching and being a student is a model of vulnerability.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as a teacher, making sure that I'm not taking that for granted. Mm-hmm. And so in that, making sure that people feel welcome enough as their full selves, not putting on any facade.
Right.
So there is also always an altar, an ancestral altar that's, a lot of my work is deeply connected to Harriet Tubman and her mission for liberation for herself first, for her family, and then more people, and then more, and that is a specific model. You got to free yourself first, right? And then you got to consent. There's some people don't want to be free, right?
They do not.
And it's okay. And it's okay. And some people may come to emotional emancipation circle and like, this is too much. I wasn't ready. And but what will happen is, I notice is that those people will come back and they will say, I wasn't ready for it then.
Right.
But I'm ready for it now.
Yep. And that's, like you said, that's okay. And I always say, come or don't.
Yeah.
It's not maybe it's not right now.
Yeah.
Because I had one of my friends, as I was evolving and she was watching me, she was just like asking me about it. And then I was going to share some information. She said, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
And I said, that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's finish doing what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just listening for that. And so that was like releasing ego and hearing the person right in front of you. Right. And still holding space for their conscious evolution, like vibrationally. And then whenever it happens, right? And it may not be through you or with you, and that's okay. And that's kind of the same energy. The people that come to emotional emancipation circles are there for a reason. They're called there. And I don't take that lightly. So with that, with emotional emancipation circles and having the ancestral altar, and then having these beautiful affirmation cards that Association of Black Psychologists put together, having those be like those cards that you can just pull out to remind you of who you are and remind you that this is the world that we are in, but it is not you. It is not us. And so just kind of remembering that.
Yes.
There's always a grounding question that is started with ancestral wisdom. It's connected to, this is the end of a Lucille Clifton poem, where she says, come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. And so my grounding question is, what tried to take you out this week, but failed? Right. And so just to be able to name that, to allow us to breathe with each other and to remind us of our resilience. And many people have a complicated relationship with that word resilience. And I get it and I understand. Because sometimes it's like, I don't want to just keep being resilient. I just want to thrive. You know what I mean? Like, why do I have to keep being resilient from things that are coming at me? But that is life, right? We have to learn how to be resilient. And for Black people, I would say we are one of the most resilient people on this planet, because to experience all the things that we've had, that we've experienced without any support, like there was no New Deal for us. We were cut out of that. And all the way up, that we are still leading culture and influencing. We may not get all the credit, but we know what's up. We know what's true, you know? And so it's being able to name this resilience that we have individually is important, because it allows us to tap into that more and more. When I can mirror back to someone, when they say, some of the white women at my job tried to take me out, right? Because that's what they be doing sometimes, I mean, we can look at the results of this election.
If you just look on your own, like, no shade, but
no shade.
The numbers show straight up. If you look at the numbers and who voted, in the first election, and now who voted in this election, the same ones who are out there carrying those signs. But when it comes to us and the things that we need, the solidarity is lacking, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, if you say 71% of white women voted for Ted Cruz, like, it makes sense.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so it's we got to make sure that we're not saying, well, why did they do? We know why.
Right.
We know why. And we have to accept
crazy.
that.
Just accept
right.
that. We're not crazy. We are seeing what we're seeing. There's not like a little game that's being played. It's blatant. It's unapologetic. It is what it is. So now what are we going to do?
Exactly. And so when we talk about this resilience, right? So giving that example of, somebody coming into the circle and they're saying these white women on their job are being, just doing these microaggressive things and passive aggressive things. And so what they did was they reached out to a friend or they went outside and got some fresh air. So mirroring back, the resilience is that they reach out to community,
right?
And so to mirror it back to them, some of the skills that they are already doing without even thinking about it, it supports them in seeing that as a more conscious choice and being able to employ that more and more.
So you talked about the feeling of what an emotional emancipation circle is, and then so Black Joy Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have been to a few of those myself. Okay. So think about this. And this was so cool, right? So now here I am. I walk in with one of my friends, and we got Black folk laying on beautiful. This was in the summertime. This specific.
Oh, this was outside.
We outside. They coloring. They sitting on colorful blankets. People inside eating watermelon. People are getting massages. People are just sitting on the porch taking a nap, feeling safe. Feeling okay to just be who they are. There was no like airs. You walk in, you like, hey, y'all can sit here or not. Sit over there if you want. But it was just funny for me to walk in and I'm just like, we just chilling.
Yeah.
And this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's
and
like
children were playing
right
without any people were watching.
I was feeding people's babies some watermelon, and they were having whole conversations with me, and I was just like, they're safe,
Yeah.
Don't do that. Stop touching those people's stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it was just so freeing and liberating to be amongst those kinds of people. And what I was thinking was, this is how it's supposed to be, and we are so stressed out, like. My limbic system was calm. I was calm. I was just having a good time. And my girlfriend, Anisha, shout out to Anisha, we were there together and we kept saying, we gotta go. So we found one. And those are awesome. So talk to us about Black Joy Sundays and do you still have them?
Yeah. So Black Joy Sunday was actually created, co-created with myself and my comrade and brother, Aaron Goggins.
Okay.
And it came out of the Charleston massacre at the church. And it started out by just him asking, like, if we ain't safe in church, where can we be safe?
Right.
And for me, I said, we need some joy because we don't know what the next week is going to bring.
Right.
And so for us, we have to be able to hold on to each other. And a part of what had us survive as a people was our joy.
Yeah.
And so where is that in all of this? Everything is that we're doing, this organizing, doing this deep introspective healing work. Where is the joy in that, right? And so we have it in pockets with each other and spurts, but like intentional coming together and gathering just for joy. Right? It wasn't present. And so we created it. Yeah. Right? Like we always do, like the history of our people. Yeah. That's what we do. Yeah. And so it started out with his long hashtag, if we ain't safe in church. And I always get on him about his long hashtags. And then I just said, okay, what about Black Joy Sunday? And so that's what it was called. And it was a gathering. It started in Malcolm X Park. Which is now gentrified beyond that's a whole other topic. Yes, I know. But we started there and had, chefs come that were wanting to donate food. One of my friends who was a master chef, Chef Joe, came out and brought like fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. There were people that were coming out, musicians that just had like little song ciphers where people could just make up songs. They just played a rhythm, made up some songs. There were people that were meditating. There were people that were coloring. And the intention of that is to have us come together, acknowledge the pain that many of us are experiencing, and allowing joy to be unearthed in that moment. So acknowledging it, not dismissing it,
Right.
right? Acknowledging it and making a conscious choice in this moment to focus on joy.
Which is a birthright.
Yeah.
Like, we're supposed to be joyful, vital,
Absolutely.
healthy, happy, abundant.
Yeah. And I'm really proud of that, because that was how we centered healing within the chapter of Black Lives Matter DC,
Mhm.
which a part of which I co-created.
Okay.
I'm not connected with the chapter anymore,
Okay.
because I'm made room for other people to step into their leadership,
Yeah.
but still able to support them in that. And so it may still be happening. I'm not sure. But that is something that we, encourage other people to be able to do on their own. There was a group from Canada that came down just to come and attend the Black Joy Sundays.
Okay.
And we talked to them about how to do it. So now there's Black Joy Sunday in Canada.
Wow. Okay.
And so, so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's just double dutch, it's jump rope,
Yeah.
it's twerking, it's anything it is that brings you joy.
Yes.
We just encourage you to bring it.
That's awesome. So you talked about being a part of Harriet's Apothecary and how you align with the principles of Harriet Tubman. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Harriet's Apothecary is a beautiful, beautiful transformative healing collective based out of Brooklyn.
Okay.
And it was co-created by Adaku Utah and Harriet Tubman.
Okay, yeah.
And so we are a collective of Black femme folk, queer and trans, and cis and a whole multitude who travel across the world facilitating healing spaces and workshops focused on healing justice and reclaiming and embodying our humanity, our divinity, our dignity, all of that. And then teaching people how to do that in a more intentional way.
Right.
And most of the folks are out in Brooklyn. Some are in upstate New York on beautiful farms, so Wild Seed Farm and Soul Fire Farm. There's some folks that are in North Carolina. Shout out to Moon, who is there, and I'm in DC.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful community where we come together, share different healing practices and modalities with each other, and we come together for different institutions or schools or folks that want to bring us out. We facilitate healing villages for them, and we do those for the community seasonally. And so we have another one that's going to be coming up, the Winter Healing Village, that'll probably be in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I don't have the date just yet.
Okay.
But Harriet's Apothecary on Instagram, you can find that there. And get all that information.
Okay, that sounds awesome. So now you are a mom, also a wife and a mom.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do all this work and still be a mom and a wife?
I have an amazing partner. Who recognizes who his wife is. Okay. And has grown and stretched in ways beyond I could ever think to be secure within himself as we both shine, and as he's growing into his own abilities and as a shaman, as an herbalist, and so we really communicate well with each other and love each other very deeply, and want to support each other in having the fullest expression of ourselves in this incarnation. And so with a lot of his support, I also have great community members, still some of the same folks that are with Black Lives Matter DC, who we have a great community of people who love my children and want to be with them, and they want to be with them too. And so and they support the work that I do. So when they know that I'm out of town doing emotional emancipation circle work, or any of the various workshops that I do, emotional emancipation circles is just one. But they support me in that, and there's a mutual support in that as well. And so there's a good balance. I didn't always have the balance down.
It's tough. It
can be. But I also make sure that my children see me living out my purpose, because I'm also supporting them in living out theirs. And so there isn't like a context of like mommy's leaving, right? Mommy is supporting people and getting free. And so that's what they understand and know.
And how old are they?
They are 8 and 9. So my daughter, Marley Hendricks, just turned 8. And my son, Solomon Amari, is 9.
Okay, so they're still pretty young.
They're still pretty young.
And so do they have opinions of what's happening, or?
They do. They do. They have very strong opinions of what's happening. And that's not the focus of their conversation, because they live in a world that feels like liberation for them.
Right. Okay.
Where they're not in that vibration. They don't have anxious adults around them, because all the adults that are around them are meditating and doing qigong. Like, this is the world that we created for our kids intentionally.
Right.
And so we have these conversations, and so they are some free little Black children, and it is very different from how I was raised. Yeah. And so even when they're embodying their own liberation, I have to make sure that I'm checking myself and that I'm not trying to be too controlling or too restrictive. And I had to adjust my parenting in that way, because that's not the ways that I was parenting, right. And so it's different. And then I have my children that are, the children that are coming up now are real different. Like they're on a whole different vibration. They came into this planet on a whole different vibration. And so when I struggle with time management sometimes and trying to get the kids to school. And sometimes I'm like, no, we got to get out the house. And so my daughter is like, Mom, don't rush me. And I had to be like, you're right. I'm sorry. Because my lack of time management is making me rush my children, and it's creating some anxiety for her. And she had the power within herself to say to her mother, don't rush me. Mm-hmm. The other thing with my son the other day, when I was telling him about, cleaning his room and getting the clothes up off the floor, and he was in the front seat of the car, he looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, I know you're not talking. And I was like, you're right. Touche. Because I have clothes all on my floor too. And so it is like a recognition, like they are our mirrors. They are. Right. And so just making sure that I'm not, I'm being real. I see my children as human beings. Right. So if I'm not going to yell or spank another adult, why would I do that to a child,
So it's interesting, as a mom, my daughter will be 16 next week. She reminded me again today, we're on the countdown. And so, she probably was 8 or 9 when I was starting this transition and this evolution. And so she was already pretty much grown. Like, your kids are 8 or 9. They are who they are. As I started to change things in the crib, she was like, what's happening here? Some of it she was down with, and some of it she questioned some more. Some of it she talked junk to me, to family members. And so, we had that. But as we've grown together, and then, lots of the teachings that I have, been exposed to, I now share with her. Yeah. Just little baby bird, little drops, little seeds. I'm not trying to inundate her, overwhelm her. She can do what she wants to do, right? Yeah. And so she had an experience this summer at the fair in Arlington County, Virginia, where she saw one of her friends be apprehended by the police. Yeah. Thrown down to the ground, and his mom came to his defense, and the police berated her. Now, this is at the fair, in front of everybody. And she was telling me everybody was chilling at the fair. And these were the children who were being picked on, like being followed, being watched, being accused of stealing some tickets, craziness, right? Yeah. So I go pick her up, and she's overwhelmed. She's crying. She's angry, and she's trying to figure it out, but I'm even angrier. Yeah. Right? Because I'm like, now it has now been baptized into the bull crap. Yeah. Right? And it was just the fair. Like, I had taken her since she was 4. And so now she has this experience, and she sees this little boy. So I was like, where am I going to take her to release some of this stuff, whether she wants to go or not? Because she wasn't down to come. Yeah. But I took her to Erica. We had a small group, emotional emancipation circle, and maybe she didn't even talk that much, and she even left early. but she was there.
Yeah, she
And I
was there in
wanted
the
her to be able to
conversation.
see even the beginning, how you break down like what's accepted in the group, and some of the questions you asked us and things like that. So like for our children, like it's better to start them off early.
Yeah.
Start us off early, because those of us who are 40, 50 plus, 60 plus and beyond, we already had the stress.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to unpack and awaken and heal from it and recalibrate ourselves and do all these things. But the earlier we can get our babies to realize that they're beautiful and that they are smart and their birthright is the joy.
Yeah.
And to not have to deal with, on the energetic level, stuff happens, but to have the tools to be able to transmute all that and to transfer that energy, that's the key right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with 10 minutes,
okay.
Yes, with 10 minutes, please offer some tools for us today, as many of our family is stressed out from these election results. I mean, we had some wins. There were some wins. I'm not going to say we had some wins. I'm going to say there were some wins. Some Black and brown women got put into places that they hadn't been put in before.
Yeah.
And so from my understanding, this will be very impactful when they start to redistrict things. So that's helpful. More voices in the room usually helps. And so, but what can we tell the family who, they just stressed out today, and probably this is just another day of stress.
Yeah.
So what can we tell them?
What I would offer, and there's so many different tools for people to use that bring them back to themselves. One, I would say the first is breathing. Remember to breathe. And so many times we go through our day and don't even realize that we're holding our breath, and just to take a breath and just that.
Yep.
Not the shallow breaths, right?
Which I
not
was just
the
doing.
Not the high up in the chest, but really from the belly, just to breathe. And when you feel anxiety, when you feel this tightness in your jaw or whatever, just to be able to take a breath and to do that maybe 3 times, just to breathe. My dear friend Adaku would say, breath is the most potent medicine that we can access at any time. And the air that we are breathing is ancient. The air we're breathing is the same air that Harriet Tubman breathed, the same air that Nannie Helen Burroughs breathed, and just to know that we can access that at any time is so powerful. So breath work, making sure that we're breathing. The next is making sure that we're drinking water. I'm just giving the bare basic stuff. But
that's what we need.
Yeah. And that's so making sure that we're drinking water, right? Add more water to your diet, because you're going to be flushing out more, because you're going through your day absorbing, right?
Yes.
Making sure that you are not carrying energy that's not yours into your home. Right. So making sure that you're drinking water. And then the other, I would say, I could say rest, which is important. But I will also say make sure that some part of your week there is joy. So schedule some joy for yourself during the week.
Right.
Whether you start your Sunday with joy, or you find a day to take a twerking class, take a cooking class, something like that, or just go to the movies or spend time with people who make you laugh, or watch something that's not going to have you be stressed out. Don't, turn off the news. Right. If you could turn off the news or just shift from like not consuming news right when you wake up, something like that, where you just, when you get out the bed, just maybe breathe for a minute and then get started with your day, and then maybe turn on the news a little later, Right. So just making sure that you are centering yourself as much as you can. So the breath work, the making sure that we're drinking water, rest, and then also making sure that you are scheduling time for joy for yourself.
So I want to kind of like unpack just a few of those things and how I am learning to use those things. So breath is easy. And as I just was sitting here, I was holding my breath because I think I was reliving the trauma of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So breath is so important. And so at the beginning of the show, I was just talking about what I did to start my day.
Yeah.
And it was not going to be getting on CNN or
Right.
online to see who won these elections, right? What I decided to do was sit in the sun and breathe.
Yeah.
And do my meditation, drink my water, drink my tea, took my B12 and stretched.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And so
that's good body work.
Yeah, for me, I call the morning the power hour. So I am intentional about not getting, because what I want to know is after I just go through these, what is your regimen for self-care and self-preservation? I refuse to get on so early because I want to start vibrating high.
Yeah.
That's how I want to start. And so the water every day, scheduling joy intentionally. So last week or a few weeks ago was my birthday.
Okay.
I had my family coming in town and the plans were not going as myself. Clipboard cherry is what they call me because I got the production schedule down. You get here then, you get here then. This is what's happening, right? Wasn't happening that way. And as I was deciding to decide not to allow it to bother me, I said, I have planted all the seeds to make this a beautiful weekend, and it's not going how I want it, but it's going as it should. Think I'll schedule myself a massage. And I went and got a massage. I enjoyed it. I turned off the brain chatter after a few minutes, you know, because you still got to like ground yourself in. And then I did that intentionally, and then everything worked out beautifully. Yeah. Just as it should. And it was a lesson to myself about just, you know, freeing myself from the anxiety and whatever else that was not under my control. So tell us what we have like 4 minutes now. Okay. Tell us what your self-care regimen is, and even maybe a tip for the kiddos.
Yeah. One of the things that I do regularly, I used to do it weekly, and now I do it more so monthly, is spiritual baths. And so taking a spiritual bath, allowing myself to create a beautiful bath for myself, and maybe I can post some of this some more on Facebook with the time that we have. Yeah. But spiritual baths support me in being able to release anything that I have been carrying. So I cry a lot in the spiritual bath. Cry for tears that I probably should have cried a week ago, right? Yeah. And so, but this space is for that. Yeah. And I make a beautiful bath with pink, yellow, and orange rose petals. Oh, wow. I might put some shells in it. I'll put honey in the water for some sweetness. Okay. It's directly connected in drawing in Mother Oshun, because I'm a fire sign, I'm a Sagittarius, I have a lot of fire. And so I make sure I put peppermint in the water for cooling, eucalyptus for healing, and lavender for calming. And so with that honey in the water, it allows me to embody more sweetness instead of the fire, right? So giving a little more balance to it. And so it's just allowing me to be softer, and it allows me to remember my softer side too. And it just, I'm able to just cry and release and let things that no longer serve me just go down the drain. Right. And so that, and then meditation. It may be 3 minutes, it may be 4, it may be a whole hour, depending on what I'm feeling. So that, I would say those are my 2 go-tos. And twerking. Okay, you gotta twerking is one of them hips. Too. Yeah, it supports your root chakra. Yeah. So that's that power stance too. And it has been, it's looked at in a way that is only sexual, right? But also sexuality is demonized, right? And so there's a way to tap into that sexual, sensual energy that support you in manifesting the things creativity, that you want. Exactly. So
we had Taylor from the Womb Sauna here talking about that, and then we had Candace Mickens from Sacred Touch talk about the power of touch. Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be sexual.
Exactly. And so those are the things that I really tap into.
Okay. Yeah. Now, for meditation, for me, I don't, like if you consider meditation, it might look like you're just in the OM position.
Mhm.
I have to do a movement meditation.
Yeah.
I can't just sit still. So those are just things to consider.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now, how can people find you? How can they come to them Black Joy Sundays? How can they come to those emotional emancipation circles? And where can they follow you?
Yes. So for Black Joy Sunday, I would say reach out to Black Lives Matter DMV.
Okay.
They're on Facebook as well.
Okay. Okay.
For emotional emancipation circles, I now host those. I hosted them in DC for about 4 years. I have one growing in Maryland now in Hyattsville at a beautiful place called the Dream Village.
It's beautiful.
It's at 5128 Baltimore Avenue in Hyattsville, and that's on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays.
Okay.
At 7 to 9. You can find me on Facebook at Erica Totten, Erika, and on Instagram is To Live Unchained.
Okay.
TOLIVE Unchained. That's also the same on Twitter.
Okay.
And I think that is it. And my website, toliveunchained.com.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I'm so excited to have these tips. Y'all woosah. Get you some water, breathe, and schedule some joy this week.
Yes.
All right. And we'll see you next time in the sanctuary.
All right.
All right, Facebook people. Thank you. Somebody's going to come later. So we will see you next time.